is interpretation. A poem well read is a poem well understood. In this podcast, brought to you by the Literary Life podcast, poet Thomas Banks will help you increase your love and understanding of poetry. Poetry is not a silent endeavor. It's meant to be heard, and more importantly, it's meant to be recited out loud. Join us now as poet Thomas Banks presents The Well-Read Poem.
Hello, and welcome to The Well-Read Poem. For today's episode, continuing our theme of death, I'm going to be reading you an ancient Roman poem from the great era of Roman literature, Latin language literature. The first century BC, which is roughly corresponds to the end of the Republic, the beginning of the imperial era, and one of its better, though I think not so well known as he deserves to be, poets. This is one of the elegies of Propertius. Propertius was contemporary with Virgil, with Horace, Maecenas, Augustus Caesar, and he was fortunate in that he lived during a time of great literary creativity, and also right after the end of the civil wars. Rome, for about a century, from, say, about 130 BC to 30 BC, is horribly vexed with political strife and violence, assassination, autocracies, revolutions, wars, including many wars of Romans fighting Romans. And then all of that comes to an end when Octavian, who later becomes Augustus Caesar, defeats Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC and establishes himself as effectively an emperor. He tends to use the term princeps, which means first citizen, to describe himself, but in effect, he is the first Roman emperor. And there's a great flowering of Latin literature during his reign. Is usually considered kind of the golden age of Latin literature, Virgil's Aeneid being the primary fruit of this. But there's a lot of other writers as well, poets primarily, but prose writers also. And among the elegiac poets, Propertius is a very important name. Propertius was born in central Italy in the region of Umbria, and interestingly, if you ever find yourself on a pilgrimage or just traveling as a tourist through Umbria, one of the towns you have to see, of course, is Assisi, the home of the famous Catholic Saint Francis of Assisi. And there is supposedly the ruins of there are the ruins of an ancient Roman house which allegedly was the home of Propertius. So Propertius comes from the same town as Saint Francis, albeit born many centuries apart. Propertius is known for the intensity of his love poetry. It sometimes has kind of a violent and not always an optimistic turn in it, but he is a very, even if he's kind of a rough-hewn sort of poet, he is very readable, and there's a good English translation of him from about 1960 by a Latin scholar and poet named Constance, and I'm going to be reading from her version of Propertius' Elegies here. I'll give you the Latin also of this poem, which is only about a dozen lines long, and this is a plea to the gods of death, the god and the goddess of death, Pluto and Persephone. So, Propertius' Elegies from Book 2. Pity us mortals, O Persephone. Lord Pluto, soften the heart that all men fear. There are so many beauties in your kingdom. May we not keep this girl our loveliest here? Iope's yours, Europa, white-skinned Tyro, Pasiphae who bore the Minotaur, the fairest Greeks, the loveliest of Trojans, Apollo's Troy, old Priam's, now no more. and Roman maidens as delectable. These two are ashes on a funeral pyre. No face can charm death, and no fortune buy him. All must fall victim to his greedy fire. O Cynthia, rescued now from equal dangers, dance to Diana, show your gratitude. Pay homage to the goddess once a heifer, and for us both give thanks 10 times renewed. And the woman he addresses in this poem, Cynthia, who is the subject and recipient of the dedication of many of his poems, it's kind of uncertain who Cynthia was, as is the case with many of the women mentioned by name in Roman love poetry. Cynthia also is a divine name. That's one of the names of the goddess of the moon. Artemis or Diana are better known ones. And it's probable that this is a literary title bestowed on her, whether she was a real woman or not. Entirely possible that she was. Probably her name was something else, and Cynthia is a name of Greek origin rather than Roman. But in any case, let me read you the Latin version of this poem, and then I'll read the English once more. So here's the Latin, and the Latin poem, like all of Propertius' poems, is written in elegiac couplets, and an elegiac couplet, being a couplet, is 2 lines long, and consists of a hexameter followed by a pentameter line. So, haec tua Persephone maneat Clementia, nec tu Persephonae conjunx saevior esse velis. Sunt apud infernos tot milia formosarum, pulcra sit in superis si licet una locis. Vobiscum est Iope, vobiscum candidatiro, vobiscum Europe nec proba pacifae. Et quod Troia tulit vetus et quod Achaia formas, et Thebae et Priami diruta regna senis. Et quaecum querat in numero Romana puella occidit, has omnis ignis avarus habet. Nec form aeternum, aut quiquam est fortuna perennis, longius aut propius mor sua quemque manet. Tu quoniam es mea lux, magno de missa periclo, munera dianae debita re decoros, re detiam excubias divae nunc ante juvencae, votivas noctes, ei mihi solve decem. And even if you have no Latin, you probably recognize, the proper names: Persephone, Dianae, Priami, Troia, and such nouns as infernos in line 3. So now let me read you the English translation one more time. Pity us mortals, O Persephone. Lord Pluto, soften the heart that all men fear. There are so many beauties in your kingdom. May we not keep this girl, our loveliest, here? Iope's yours, Europa, white-skinned Tyro, Pasiphae who bore the Minotaur, the fairest Greeks, the loveliest of Trojans, Apollo's Troy, old Priam's, now no more. And Roman maidens as delectable, these two are ashes on a funeral pyre. No face can charm death, and no fortune buy him. All must fall victim to his greedy fire. O Cynthia, rescued now from equal dangers, dance to Diana, show your gratitude. Pay homage to the goddess once a heifer, and for us both give thanks 10 times renewed. This has been the Well-Read Poem. Thank you very much.
This has been The Well-Read Poem with poet Thomas Banks, brought to you by the Literary Life podcast. For show notes and the text of the poem, visit theliterary.life. To find out more about Thomas Banks and the poetry resources he offers, go to houseofhumaneletters.com. This podcast is patron-supported. Visit patreon.com/theliterarylife to find out how you can support this podcast and get additional bonus content, including monthly live poetry explications. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Thank you for listening.